Welcome to Tanak Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy Land. He's laughing his head off, and I have no idea why. What's up, Rabbi? Welcome back. Don't smoke crack. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I just cracked myself up. I don't know why. I just think I looked at myself in the screen. I just had to laugh. I don't know. It's been one of those days.
Right. That's funny. Well, welcome back. It's been a minute, and we're ready to rock on. So the last two episodes we did Hell and Demons, etc., but we really haven't gotten to Hell yet. So we just retitled today for Does Hell Exist? And that's where we'll head for today. So, all right. So the show's all yours.
Okay, always a pleasure to be here, and the answer is yes, hell exists. Well, it's been a great show. You know, I cut a lot of time out here, so before we get to that, we wanted to speak about Dibbuks. A Dibbuk, or it's actually hard to define exactly how would you translate a Dibbuk, but it's basically a soul that for whatever reason cannot get its true rest, and it's being constantly chased by what we call Malchei Chabola, these destructive angels. Now, the question obviously is, so what happened to the soul, right? Which gets in a whole discussion of exactly how the world works. Because when a person dies, we have to understand a person is going to get judged for their actions. So just like, everything's being recorded now, we have two angels that follow us everywhere that are recording everything we do. So person can do something good, person can do something bad. There are physical repercussions for our actions. There are spiritual repercussions for our actions. And seemingly enough, what happens, a person does something in this world as a physical act can also be something that is spiritual. In other words, a person, let's say a Jew makes a blessing. When they make a blessing, it should have an effect on the spiritual world and have an effect in this world for all fruit-bearing trees. That being the case, if I said the blessing right, forget about Kabbalah. If I said it right and I knew what I was doing, pretty much, then what I have is a blessing for all fruit-bearing trees. Now, there are different levels that a person can do things. A person can certainly, God forbid, make mistakes, right? If a person sins, they're going to get punished, as it says, we say every day in the second paragraph of the Shema. If we do the right thing, everything is good. If we do the wrong thing, then we're going to pay a price. Now, the question is, how much of a price do we pay? Right? We can pay a more serious price. We can pay less of a price. Depends on if we did it on purpose. Depends if we did it by accident. It depends on the source of our soul. It depends on a lot of different factors. But one thing a person can never say is that when they get upstairs after 120 years, they cannot say, I did not do this action. They may try and justify it, why they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, right? They may try and say, well, you have to understand, it wasn't really a cookie jar. It was something else, whatever it is. But a person can never deny, right? This is something that when we speak about hell in a little bit, this is going to be a problem, because when anybody that's had an out-of-body experience, right, whether a Jew or a non-Jew, right, they go through the same thing. The soul hovers over the body. The soul wants to go to this great light, but the first thing that happens is their life flashes before their eyes. They see every last action, every last thought, right, in a matter of seconds. Everything that they've done, right? So just like in a human court, person does something wrong, they get caught, so they go to court, and how's the judge going to judge it? Unless he's corrupt, obviously, but how's he going to judge it? He's going to judge it by witnesses. What do the witnesses say? Were there good witnesses, etc. So just like in a worldly court, the judge is not going to make a decision until the judge hears all the evidence. So too, God in the heavenly court is not going to judge a person until he hears all the evidence, brings up all the angels, all the repercussions, right? All the negative things, positive things that a person has done. I mean, it's a pretty scary endeavor if we think about it. And every action, again, how a person thought, what they did, how they did it, intention, the source of their soul. So I'll tell a story just to illustrate a little bit. There was somebody went to shul, went to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, first night of Rosh Hashanah, and what does he see? He sees someone sitting in his seat. And this person is rip-roaring mad. He paid for the seat. How can someone be sitting there? Right? And sort of, put a damper, on his prayers, and he's eating his meal, and he's still upset. And he goes to sleep. So the person goes to sleep. So what happens? So he goes to sleep, and he has a dream. In the dream itself, he realizes he's being judged in the heavenly court. Well, that's a good thing, because that's what happens on Rosh Hashanah. There are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. There's a day where every single person, Jew or non-Jew, most non-Jews totally not aware, Rosh Hashanah, they get judged. Now, it doesn't mean they have to keep Rosh Hashanah, but their soul gets judged. Every single person in this world. Second day, the world gets judged, right? The world in general. So this person has a dream. What does he say he sees in his dream? First thing is he sees a big scale. When he sees the big scale, he hears a heavenly voice. The heavenly voice says, okay, bring out all the mitzvahs that he's done. So all of a sudden, he sees trainloads and trainloads of white angels. Now, some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker, right? Depending how he did, certain mitzvahs, etc. So all these angels come out and they jump on the scale. Trainloads and trainloads of angels. These white angels dance on the scale goes way down, right? Hundreds and hundreds of trains, all the angels come out, and he's feeling pretty good. So what happens? All of a sudden, he hears another heavenly voice. And the other heavenly voice says, okay, bring out all his transgressions. So all his transgressions come out. Hundreds and hundreds of trains of these black, angels, fangs, wings, whatever it is, pitchforks, they're ready for action. So they come out. Some of them are stronger. Some of them are weaker. Again, depending on the transgression that the person did. And they jump on the left side, on the other side of the scale. So now this guy's getting a little bit nervous because they're all jumping on the scale. The scale on the bad side is going down, meaning the white angels start to come up. So he's getting a little bit more nervous. The scale's going down, the white angel's coming up, scale's going down, and seemingly the white angels stop. Now, what does that mean, the white angels stop? So he understands if there are more black angels than white angels, i.e. if the scale is on the wrong side, let's say, it's on the negative side, he knows these black angels are ready to rip him to shreds. So he's getting more nervous, and he screams out, bring out more mitzvahs. No more mitzvahs. Right? And the black angels are getting ready. They got their forks and knives. They're ready to carve him up, whatever this means in the heavenly world. Right? And, in the next world. So they're ready to carve him up. And he's about to get destroyed over here. And he says, okay, I'll do anything. He says, I'll take suffering. Oh, before they're ready to carve him up, they're stopped. All of a sudden, all these trainloads of angels come out that are white angels. And they go down on the side of the scale of the white angels. And that's his dream. Right? That's his dream. And he wakes up. And the next day he goes to synagogue. When he sees this person sitting in his seat, this guy's whistling Dixie. Why? Because he understands. He understands that suffering in this world, not that we're looking to suffer, not that we're interested in suffering, but what can suffering do? Suffering can be used as an atonement, right? It can atone. Now, the problem is, why do I mention this story? Because the problem is when a person gets upstairs after 120 years and they're going to get judged for their actions. When a person had their hand caught in the cookie jar, or any of these negative things that the person did, because the angels now that are recording everything, they're bringing all this evidence. They're bringing the good evidence, they're bringing the bad evidence, and now this person, right, when he sees, these angels, these, negative black angels, and he understands, potentially what the score is, and now he's in the world of truth, right? Being in the world of truth, a person is stripped of the body, so therefore they understand things much clearer, right? They see things clear as we would never see it in this world, again, because we're in a physical body. And again, Jew and non-Jew understand this, right? If they've had this out-of-body experience, they understand now, what absolute truth is. So one aspect of hell is the fact that there's embarrassment over here. There's embarrassment for what the person has done. Now, I don't it's a little bit hard to understand how a pure soul, no body, right, is going to get embarrassed over here, right? Totally embarrassed. Meaning that when they see their life flash before their eyes, and every last action, every last thought that they've done. Now, they've probably done some good things as well, but there are probably a lot of things that they haven't done so well. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes by mistake. But when they understand what absolute truth is, and they're in that world, then that person is totally embarrassed for what they've done. Now, the one thing that they can't say is, as we mentioned before, they cannot say in any which way, I didn't do this action. That they can't say, because everything's being recorded. So what we understand as Gehenna, as hell, we understand it is a tikkun. It is something that is going to fix up the soul. Remember, when God breathes in the soul of life, when a person is alive, right? The question is when they're considered alive, when the soul goes in. Does it go in the time of conception? Does it go in at the time when the child is born? Regardless, God breathes in the spirit of life. So if he breathes in the spirit of life, what does God want essentially? God wants you to return your soul as clean and as squeaky clean as you got it before. Right? In other words, before the soul went into the body, that's really how you should return it. Now, someone's going to say, can it be true that the soul can come back as a reincarnated soul? We may speak about that. But in general, the soul, God's going to put in the body. He's going to, that soul's going to get a message, which we don't remember. We don't, no one knows truly what their purpose in life is. We may have a little bit of a clue, but in general, when God puts that spirit of life in that soul into the body, so the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says in Ethics of Our Fathers, we don't have a choice of who our parents are. We don't have a choice who our siblings are. We don't have a choice of our socioeconomic situation. There are a lot of things in this world we don't have a choice, but God says, okay, I'm going to put you in this body, and in this body, there are going to be certain things you have to rectify, right? Certain things you have to fix, right? That's why a soul can actually come back. Well, we'll hit that, I guess, a little bit. Whatever. We'll continue. We'll get back to this. But the point is, first thing is that when a person's going to get judged, then now understanding what's going on, understanding you've seen everything in your life, you understand what real truth is. So now you're totally embarrassed. So being embarrassed over here is one aspect, right? It's one aspect of hell, because the real purpose is to fix up the soul. Remember, when a person sins in this world, if you don't properly atone, what happens is your soul is full of pock marks. I don't know how this works exactly, but it's like you have holes in your soul. I guess it reminded me of like Casper the Friendly Ghost. Imagine you had Casper the Friendly Ghost in front of you, take a fork and you start making holes in him. Or like the Pillsbury Doughboy, even better, right? You got the Pillsbury Doughboy, you start hacking away, so you blow him up. Okay, that's probably not a good example, right? But when a person sins and their sin is not atoned for, either not by Yom Kippur Or let's say it's something that a person did between man and man. If you don't ask, if you spoke badly against somebody else in general, you have to ask them for forgiveness. If you don't ask them for forgiveness, all the Yom Kippurs in the world, all the suffering in the world you may get in this world doesn't atone. Why not? Because you have to ask them for forgiveness. If you did something between man and God, it depends what you did. Some things, all I have to do is repent properly, have regret, have remorse, promise I'm never going to do it again, and work hard not to do it again, and then go through Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur will atone. If it's something that's more severe, then you need Yom Kippur, and you may need to suffer in this world. If it's something even more severe, what's the most severe sin? So the Rambam says the most severe sin is the desecration of God's name. Desecration of God's name, a person has to go through Yom Kippur. They have to repent. They have to go through Yom Kippur. They have to suffer, and they have to die. Right? Until they die, they don't get atonement for that sin. So there are certain things a person's done in this world. Again, something's better, something's not. But there has to be rectification. Now, the rectification, maybe a person will get the rectification in this world. Maybe they won't have to suffer in the next world. Meaning, a person could suffer tremendously in this world. And because they suffer, suffering wipes out sin. Right? A lot of, but how does that work? Let's make this clear. Right? How does it work? Suffering only works in this world to atone as long as you admit that the suffering is coming from God. In other words, if a person complains, I'm suffering, this is terrible, get me a coffin, I just want to die, that suffering doesn't atone. Just because the person suffers does not mean they automatically get atonement. Suffering has to come with the recognition that the suffering is coming from God above. Once a person admits that the suffering is coming from God for their actions, then that can be atonement. But if someone suffers in general, and a person's complaining, it's so hard, my body, I can't see, I can't this, I just want to die or whatever, the suffering doesn't atone. There's a story that my Rebbe tells, or Mordechai Pogromansky, of blessed memory. Mordechai Pogromansky was known as the Telzer Elu. He was a Telzer, went to the yeshiva in Telz, and he was an absolute genius. He died shortly after World War II, and he was dying of cancer. He was blind. His body was in tremendous amount of pain, and the doctors wanted to give him morphine. They wanted to give him morphine, right, in order just to, ease the pain a little bit. And when he got word of that, he sat up with all his strength. Imagine, you have very little strength. A person's blind, and their body's being racked with pain, right? It's very hard to imagine such a situation. But this rabbi sat up, and he looked up to heaven. He said, God, he said, you can do whatever you want to my body. He said, I don't care what you do to my body. He said, I want all the punishment. He says, you give me all the punishment. He said, and I'm going to come to you squeaky clean in the next world. Right? So somebody like that, obviously, most people probably not holding there. Right? But somebody like that who is going to admit that the suffering is coming directly from God, that can atone. Now, make no mistake. We're not saying a person is in this world in any way, shape, or form to suffer. Nobody wants to suffer. No one's interested in suffering. No one's even interested in general of sanctifying God's name, right? If a Jew or non-Jew would put a gun to your head, to a Jew's head, doesn't apply to a non-Jew, and they would say, I want you to bow down to this guy in the stick, right? A reference to JC or a short little fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself. They say, hey, bow down to Fatso over here. They probably won't say Fatso, but they'll say, bow down Mr. Buddha over here, or we're going to kill you. So anytime, any place, a Jew has to be willing to sacrifice their life, right? They're not allowed to bow down. They're not allowed to do immoral things. They're not allowed to kill, right? They would say, kill this person, I'm going to kill you. So you have an obligation to die. So the point is that if you don't die and you don't give up your life, it's a Torah prohibition, right? You have an obligation to sanctify God's name, right? If you don't, okay, it's forbidden according to the Torah. Nonetheless, we're not looking to be put in that situation, right? Because someone's going to say, see, human sacrifice is okay. I didn't say human sacrifice is okay. I said if you're in that situation, right? Christians will be good at taking these words out of my mouth. If you're in that situation, this is what your obligation is, right? Rabbi Akiva, the Talmud says he was waiting for his whole life in order to sanctify God's name. Rabbis disagreed, right? They said that's not our goal necessarily in this world. It means that if we have to, we will, no question, because that's our obligation. Nobody really wants to do it in general, meaning that it is an obligation according to the Torah. If we're put to the test, that's what we have to do. Right, that is our obligation. Certainly in times like the Inquisition, many, many Jews gave up their lives rather than kiss the cross. That's the obligation. That's what we have to do. If that's the situation we're in. But again, nobody is looking, to do that. We don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. In general for that, but that's our obligation. Right, if we're put in that situation. So that being the case, we have to understand that suffering can atone, right? It certainly can atone for the bad actions that we do. So therefore, if we suffer enough in this world, even though we pray every day, don't bring me to trials, don't give me suffering, we don't grow without trials or without suffering. Regardless, it's not something we necessarily want. But if we suffer in this world, a person can suffer tremendously and not have to suffer in the next world. A person can suffer a lot and suffer in the next world. But what's the point? What's the point of suffering over here? God wants a person to be squeaky clean coming into the next world. Right? God wants the person to understand that when they do certain things that are wrong, they are going to suffer in this world. They are going to get punished. There is payback. God is not a masochist that says, I feel like zapping you. Boom, I'm going to zap you, and you're going to get this, and you're going to get that, and you're going to have other things go wrong. God obviously wants you to do the right thing. As we mentioned, the second paragraph of the Shema. The second paragraph of the Shema says, if I do the right thing, so we'll have water, right? We'll have food. Everything is good. If we do the wrong thing, we understand, right? There is reward and punishment. It's kind of ironic where some people will say, there's no such thing. Well, did you ever read the Bible from cover to cover? It's pretty clear. The Jews do the right thing, things are good. Jews do the wrong thing, okay. There's payback, but why is there payback? Right? There's payback because you went against the king. Right? And now, someone will say, well, you guys are so close to the king. You are the chosen people, right? Which we are, but it looks pretty bad throughout the millennium of what the Jews have gone through. That's true. Right? If you look at the scale of Jewish history, which we once did, proving, that the Torah is true because of what the Jews go through. No other nation has gone anything close to what the Jews have gone through. And when you look at history, all the suffering, all the pogroms, right? And it's all written in the Torah, the prophecies of what happens when the Jews don't do the right thing, right? So someone said you're not living up to your capability. 100% true, right? That is definitely true. We always have to be better. There's no question. But that does not negate the fact that we are still the chosen people. That has not changed, regardless of what the Christians say by Jeremiah chapter 30, right, with the new covenant, regardless of what the Muslims say, right? You can't go against what Moshe Rabbeinu says, etc. So even without going into all that, payback, punishment is going against what the king said. So if God gave you a soul, and he gave you a perfect soul, and it's got a message to do whatever it's supposed to do in this world, whatever you do to go against it, what does that do? That spits in God's face, right? Because essentially, whatever we do wrong is a merit. What is a merit? It is the rebellion. It's a rebellion against God. Now, someone will say, what do you mean? A person does something by accident, right? Let's say a Jew standing up against the wall, is not paying attention on Shabbos, and what happens? He flicked the switch, right? He shut off the switch. Now, he didn't do it on purpose, right? He wasn't interested in shutting off the light, but he did it, right? He made a mistake. So even though he made a mistake, he still has to bring a sacrifice, right? So now, I'm just going to throw this out there because it's a little bit of a scary thought, and the idea is, why does a person, the Rambam in the laws of repentance, in the first halacha, in the laws of repentance, the first chapter, the Rambam says clear that when a person does something on purpose, or even if he does it by accident, he has to confess. He has to go through confession, just like we confess on Yom Kippur, right? We beat our chest 5 times, right? I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other thing, right? So when a person sins, even by accident, so the commentaries are puzzled. What are you talking about by accident? I did it by accident. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't have negative intention over here, whatever it is that, a person did it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose, right? I did it by accident, right? So that's a totally different thing. So I understand you'd have to bring a sacrifice. That makes sense because you did something wrong. You should have paid more attention. But why in the world do I have to confess? I shouldn't have to confess. Bring a sacrifice, I get. You did something wrong, all right, even by accident. Right? So comes along the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, says the following scary idea. And the scary idea is, says the Vilna Gaon, why according to the Rambam, you have to do vidui? Why do you have to confess if I did something by accident? Because says the Vilna Gaon, it must be that you did something on purpose first. Not at the time you sinned when you did it by accident. It must be somewhere in time you did something on purpose against God. Since you did it on purpose against God, what did that do? That opened you up to sin. Once it opened you up to sin, then you're able to do something by accident. So the Vilna Gaon says an unbelievable idea. The Vilna Gaon says it's impossible to do anything by accident in general. There's no reason any Jew should ever sin by accident. So the Vilna Gaon asks, if that's true, how can a person do it? How can a person sin by accident? Says the Vilna Gaon, because you must have done something on purpose. You must have rebelled against God on purpose, and therefore you opened up yourself to sin. That is an unbelievably scary idea. Because even if we do something by accident, okay, got to be more careful. Let's say a person, in the case I gave, someone rubbed up against the wall and they turned off the light when they shouldn't have turned off the light. So what do you do to fix that up? You make sure your Shabbos observance is meticulous. You learn more about the laws of Shabbos. You continue to review the laws of Shabbos because you shouldn't have been negligent, right? It's something you should have been paying closer attention to. So anytime a person transgresses, we have to understand that once Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, I really should have started with this, really working backwards. Once Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, then the evil inclination is inside of us, right? Adam thought it was a great idea. We're going to put the evil inclination inside of us. That means every time I do something right, exponentially, my soul goes up, right? It's going to elevate the soul. It's going to elevate the body. But if I do the wrong thing, God forbid, it's going to debase the body and it's going to debase the soul, right? So God says, wow, that's a great idea. It's an unbelievable idea. God says you're a heretic. He says you're an absolute heretic, the Talmud says. What do you mean? Adam is the greatest of God's creation. How can you call him a heretic? Because he thought he knew better. He thought he knew better than God himself, which means over here that even though God may agree and that you're gonna reach potential in a much quicker way by doing the right thing and exponentially going against your evil inclination, that's brilliant. That is very good. The problem is you're going to debase the soul at the same time. You do things wrong. But even with all that, what is God going to say? I didn't create the world for that. So we have an evil inclination. We have a good inclination. And those two fight till the end, till they die. Right? Till they die, the evil inclination keeps coming, keeps coming, keeps coming. Even if a person beats it many times, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. It has a lot of patience. The evil inclination can wait and wait and wait for years. All the evil inclination needs is a little bit of a hole, and it sits there and lays dormant, right? It reminds me of gremlins. Don't put water on gremlins, right? Here you got a little bit of a hole. Do not let it expand, because at some point, 10 years later, 5 years later, 8 months later, whatever it is, all the evil inclination needs is that little hole. And once the person does something wrong again, bam, makes the hole bigger, makes the hole bigger. right? The evil inclination is not going to come along and say, you're going to desecrate Shabbos. He's not going to do that because you're not going to listen. So it'll make you lax in this, or make you lax in that, or he'll build it up over time, and then eventually a person, God forbid, will do what they shouldn't do. So when a person does the right thing, they should be rewarded. Their only problem is, we say that schar mitzvah b'hayam maleka, that the merit of a mitzvah in this world you don't get. You get the merit in the next world. Well, that's great. So if I do the right thing, God's going to save it for me in the next world. What about if I do the wrong thing? If a person does the wrong thing, what's going to happen? So potentially you're going to get punished, certainly in the next world. You are going to have to pay. But at the same time, you can get punished in this world, right? A person can get punished enough, they don't have to worry about the next world. But most likely, you probably get punished here and there, right? There's probably nothing that we've done in this, in this world that's going to say, oh, nope, you don't deserve to be punished there, right? It's hard to imagine. Depends how much a person suffers here, right? It depends on other factors as well. So a person's gonna do either good things or bad things. If a person says, I'm happy being mediocre and all that, so that person's in trouble. They're definitely in trouble, either going up or going down in spiritual terms. So then what happens? So then after 120 years, the person dies. Now, once a person dies, it depends how much they suffered in this world or whatever, but when a person dies, they're going to get judged, right? That we sort of started with. I should have really built that up, but the person's going to get judged. So now, when the person gets judged, it's going to depend how the person did it, why they did it, and all that. So now, if a person has enough merit, he has more merit than sins, so he should be able to go into God and Eden. He should be able to go into paradise, or at least in the soul world. He's going to wait for the next world, to what we call Olam Haba, which is after the time of the Messiah, when the Messiah comes. Maybe we'll speak about that a little bit also. But if not, what most souls are going to have to go through is a cleansing process. Gehenna is not a process where God's going to say, okay, I'm going to have a lot of fun over here. Hey, why is it getting so hot? God has to purge the soul. He has to purge the soul of the terrible things that it's done. Because the reality is, as the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, he brings down in the book, The Way of God, he says that there's a minimal level a person has to reach in order to get to the next world. Now, if a person doesn't reach that, they have to see what's going on with the soul. Most likely, for most people, because most people are not that evil. Most people, don't, really know that much, but they may pay a serious price because they desecrated Shabbos in public. They may lose their portion of the world to come for that, or certainly for other things, meaning they don't get cleansed. When they die, in my language, they go like a dog. They go poof, right? Even if there is a soul in that dog, doesn't matter, right? The soul's going to go up, the dog's going to die. One of the funniest things that I saw when I was in South America, when I was in Chile, so a little bit of the country I got to see. Before I left, I went to a zoo, and at the beginning of the zoo, it was hilarious. At the beginning of the zoo, they had a pet cemetery. So the only thing I could think of is Stephen King, right? But the second thing I thought of was, imagine a person buried his horse there, buried his dog there. I can't even imagine how much a grave for these animals that it costs. But here lies Fido, here lies Spot, here lies, whatever. So in general, when a person is going to get judged, their soul is going to have to get fixed up. So we hold that a soul, what's the most amount of time in general for somebody who's not that bad in this world? For somebody not that bad, it should be 11 months. That's why a person says Kaddish for a parent, for a father or a mother, says the mourner's prayer for 11 months. Because that's the amount of time that their soul is being judged in hell. So most people, again, not that evil, unless obviously some of them who lose their portion of the world to come. I mean, we can speak about that also. But in general, what is that process? That process means that whatever suffering that soul goes through, and it's hard to imagine. Because, I've seen, people speak about their out-of-body experience, and when it comes to, people asking, well, did you hear other souls? Did you hear suffering? Etc. And he says, I'm not speaking about it. he says, I absolutely refuse to speak about it because the only thing the person said was, I heard a lot of suffering. I heard a lot of people screaming, right? And again, that's the world of truth, right? So they understood. They understood what was going on, but refused to give any details. Probably don't want to, scare anybody. Probably scared the wits out of himself as well, right? So with that, what the suffering does, it is a rectification process. The rectification process means the soul has to be fixed up. In other words, if the soul has spots on it, right, it's got lesions on it, and from all the sins that it's done, so the suffering didn't help in this world, or it only helped a little bit, whatever it is. So those lesions, spiritual lesions, have to be purged. So therefore, they go to hell for a certain amount of time. Can't even imagine, what the suffering is. Again, one example, as was explained to me many years ago, is imagine you're standing in front of the King of Kings. You know absolute truth. And now you have to go through and admit what you've done. Right now, I don't know how a pure soul gets embarrassed, right? It's a little bit hard to understand. But if a person, just for argument's sake, a person got caught doing something and there's no way out of it. There's no possible way to explain it. You can't say, my hand is not in the cookie jar. Your hand is stuck in the cookie jar, right? That's it. It's stuck there. So you have to come up with some cute excuse why it's there, but you can't say it's not there. So when a person gets caught red-handed doing whatever a person has done, some things are more embarrassing, some things are less embarrassing, but in the end they are embarrassing. Right? So it's explained to me one aspect of what hell is the fact that a person is totally embarrassed. When a person is totally embarrassed, that takes away a lot of sin also. Right? You're going to say, but the person didn't suffer in this world. You're right. Right? But they're getting suffering in the next world. Now, all that suffering of the embarrassment, let's say it's not going to help enough in order that it's going to take away all the sin. So the person's going to have to go through this process. Now, all things being equal, what should happen is, for most people, they should be able to get their soul fixed up, depending, obviously, how bad it is. Right? So if they get fixed up, they met the minimal requirements in order to get into paradise, to the soul world, for Gan Eden, for the Garden of Eden. So what happens? They'll go there. They'll bask in God's glory. They'll wait for the Messiah to come. They'll wait for the next world, and all that. Good. If not, if they didn't meet that criteria, right? So now there's another option. The other option is that the soul could come back to this world, what we call reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is a Jewish concept. I know it's probably going to shock a lot of people. But as it's brought down in Kabbalah, a soul has probably been here before, right? Probably at least 2 or 3 times, maybe maximum. Heard someone explain once, maybe even 4 times. But this is probably the last run. So we don't necessarily know what we're doing here, what our purpose is. One great rabbi once explained that it could be, think of something in your life that you would rather slit your wrists and your eyeballs with razors rather than do it, right? That is probably a good indication of what you need to fix in this world. If it's something that easy, okay, it's not gonna be that big of a challenge. If it's something that's a good challenge or difficult challenge, could be. I'm not saying 100% that's what it is, but very well could be. That is what a person is doing, in this world. So a soul could potentially have the option, instead of going through suffering, more suffering up there, give them another chance, be put into another body in order to fix up what they need to fix up. Right? And, if they do that, good. If not, then they have to go through this whole process again. Right? They have to be judged and whatever. But hopefully, for most people, they should be able to get the proper judgment. They should, if they have to suffer, then they'll have their soul purged, and then they'll have a portion of the world to come. Very good, right? Very good. But what happens if a soul cannot, it's not going to go to hell, right? It's not going to go there to be purged. Maybe other things have to happen, right? Maybe other things have to happen where the soul does not get its eternal rest. One idea is what we call kafakela. Kafakela means, one explanation is basically the soul is being slingshot from one end of the universe to the other, right? Can't imagine what this is either, right? But it has no rest, right? At some point, God should give it rest in order that it can get judged, right? That's why a Jew, has to be buried in the ground. If it's not buried in the ground, the soul cannot get judged. If the soul cannot get judged, now we'll speak a little bit, about a Dibbuk, what can happen. A soul can, try and be destroyed, by what we call these malchei Kabbalah, these destructive angels. For whatever it's done, it cannot get its eternal rest. There are stories of people, there's a story of somebody, I think it's a story here, that on a certain highway or a certain street, many people have said the same story. They're driving down the street, and all of a sudden they see a person jump out in front of the car, and the car goes over the person, clunk, 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 and they stop the car because they feel that they ran over somebody. They stop the car, they look underneath, there's nobody there. Right? Now, this happened to countless number of people. They spoke to a rabbi in the city, and they said, oh yeah, it's a common occurrence. Why? Because, such and such a person, many years ago, what did they do? So they committed suicide. How did they commit suicide? They jumped in front of a car. Now, part of the atonement process for that person is they have to keep going through it over and over and over again. How many times? I don't know. Right? That's for God to decide. Right? God can judge a person's soul forever. If he wants to. He can keep reconstructing again. It sounds like a bad Freddy Krueger movie over here. The Talmud tells the story of Titus, where Titus says that he made this rebellion against God, and when he died, right, in his will, he said, carve up my body, burn it, and take my ashes across the 7 seas, because God's not going to be able to do anything, right? He's not going to be able to punish me. So God says, okay, you don't think I can punish you? So what does God do? So the Talmud says God gathers his ashes every single day, puts them back together. I can't even imagine what this is. Takes all his ashes from all the seas, takes all his ashes, puts Titus back together, and he burns them again. And then he does it tomorrow. Then he does it the next day. And he's going to do that forever. Right? The soul doesn't disintegrate over here. He just keeps punishing and punishing and punishing. So sometimes a soul can get punished like that. I would say, again, most people are probably not that evil. If they're not that evil, that's probably, it's probably not going to happen. But there could be certain things where a person has to come back. Let's say they owed money to somebody, instead of, coming to their kids and say, I want you to pay this one or that one, because I owed them money and I didn't pay them, or whatever. That I know a number of people has happened to. Have had dreams where family members came to them, etc., because they were suffering. They were suffering to no end. Or there are other stories where the soul actually comes to this world, right, and does these little acts, and somehow gets money returned to this one, that one, runs away, whatever, and that can happen. That can certainly happen as well. Now, in our case of a Dibbuk, right, a Dibbuk is a soul that does not get eternal rest. It's being chased for any number of reasons by these destructive angels. Now, what's its recourse? Is imagine if a person is being chased, being chased all over. They have no respite, they have no rest, whatsoever. So what does the spiritual force do? What does a soul do? The only way a soul can survive and live in this world, as long as it's not a demon, because a demon has certain character traits of humans as well, a soul needs a body. Right? Sounds like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? Remember that? Aging myself also. Anyway, so you have a soul over here about to be destroyed. The only place it can find any solace whatsoever, any rest, is to jump into a body. Now, it's a little bit hard to understand. How can you have two souls in one body? Right? Again, it's a little bit hard to understand. But for whatever reason, there have been souls that have jumped into bodies. However, they were able to get into the body and overcame the other soul. In other words, there are two souls. The other soul sort of gets stepped on, squished, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And that soul takes over the body. Now, that soul is only taking over the body because it's got nowhere else to go, right? Absolutely has nowhere else to go. So there have been times in history where this has happened, and you need great rabbis very much steeped in Kabbalah in order to get the soul out, because obviously you can't have two souls in one body. That certainly doesn't work. So there was a story many years ago, the famous story with the Chofetz Chaim, that there was a certain soul. There was a certain soul that jumped into someone's body, took over the body, and essentially took over this other soul. As well as the other souls sort of got squashed or whatever it was, and the soul refused to leave. So they tried different things to try and get the soul to leave, and the soul refused to leave. So finally, they had an idea. They came up with an idea. What was the idea? The idea was, what is a soul? What is the soul in this body? What's its main fear? Besides getting destroyed by these destructive angels, what is the fear? The fear is holiness. If it comes, the last thing that this soul wants, because it's a tremendously corrupted soul over here, the last thing this soul wants is to come in contact with somebody that is extremely holy. That's not what the soul wants. Kind of like, secular Jews. The last people they want to come in contact with are Orthodox Jews, because, it makes them feel guilty, or even if they don't necessarily feel guilty, but, they don't like their presence around them. So what do they tell this soul? So they told the soul the following. They say, listen, we're going to give you a certain amount of time. If you don't leave this body by that time, we're going to bring the Chofetz Chaim. Right? We are going to bring the Chofetz Chaim over here. And this soul went ballistic. No, the soul was terrified. More terrified than these destructive angels. Right? Because it did not want to come in contact with the holiest person of that generation. Right? So the soul's like, no. So the rabbis threaten the soul, says, listen, you got X amount of time. You don't get out of this body, Chofetz Chaim's on his way. Right? He is on his way, and that soul will get destroyed other ways. Right? How's he going to get destroyed? Going to get destroyed because he can't stay in holiness. He's going to run away like the plague. The closer the Chofetz Chaim gets, the worse it is. I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess one example I would give is probably a bad example. Imagine a English person opens a bottle of Marmite, right? A bottle of yeast extract. Now, a lot of people in England like yeast extract. Put that in front of an American's nose, they'll run. They'll run like the plague. I said it's not really, probably not a good example. But I remember when I was in yeshiva many years ago, we had these English guys there, and they had Marmite. Anytime they wanted to scare the Americans, all they had to do was open it up, right? All they had to do was open it up, stick it in your face. You ran. I mean, you just couldn't stand the smells. Okay, I wouldn't say it's the greatest example, but it's a similar thing where he doesn't want to come in contact, with this holy person. But I'll tell another story. There was a story many years ago, as well, where this soul overtook someone's body. And the soul, remember, this soul or any soul knows a lot of information of what's going on, before, or what's going on in the present. It's got a certain, level of understanding that we don't. That certainly we don't, because we're limited. We're certainly limited, by time and space. And they're not limited. They're limited by time. They're not limited by. They're limited by space. So regardless what happened when this Dibbuk, when this soul started to speak, it started saying all kinds of things, right? It started, blaspheming against this and against that and the other thing. In the end, what did this soul end up doing? This soul ended up giving over information that was verified to be true. And the information that was verified to be true, what happened? It uprooted a number of marriages. Right? There was, I don't know, I guess this soul was a snitch, so to speak, and gave over information that obviously wasn't known. And that ended up destroying, a number of people's marriages. So is this very common? No, right? Most likely it's not. It doesn't happen all the time. It's very infrequent, if that. Doesn't happen very often, right? It doesn't happen very often at all. The point being is explaining how it can be that a soul actually can come back to this world in reincarnation. Really, a soul doesn't want to come back. When God puts the soul into the body, right, as we said before, God is going to breathe in the spirit of life. The soul itself is basking at that point in God's glory. Whatever it's doing in the next world, in spiritual terms, whatever it's doing, it does not want to leave that. It does not want to go in the body. That's like the last thing it wants to do. So God says, okay, soul 2225.3, right? You're going into Coffman's body. It's like, no, do anything but that. God says, you're going into the body. It's like, come on, let's, we'll play Monty Hall. Let's make a deal. Come on, let me do something else. I'll sweep the floors. I'll do this. It's like, no, you're going into the body. So God has to essentially convince the soul and get the soul to go into the body. So that if the soul is basking in all the spirituality, it doesn't want to leave. It doesn't want to come into this world, right? But the soul, when it gets judged, right, sometimes it's given an option, right? It's given an option if it wants to go through, the difficulties of being purged, right, of suffering because of the sins that it did, or have another chance in this world, right? So a lot of times, I mean, I can't say for sure, right? But it would seem that most people's souls have come back more than once. So obviously they've taken up the offer, right? Instead of going through suffering, say, no, give me another chance, right? Let me go back and try and fix things up. The only problem is someone's going to say, if you don't know what you need to fix up, how is that fair, right? How in the world is that fair? So, that's a good question. But, we have to use all our strengths. Everybody knows what their strengths are. We also know what our weaknesses are. We have to try and maximize, all these good things that we do, and even stay away from, negative things, but doing things that may be so difficult for us to do. For some people, it may be, not showing gratitude. Maybe the last thing they want to do is admit someone did a favor for them, or that somebody helped them, right? I don't think the Torah says probably almost nothing worse than someone who shows lack of gratitude. Someone gave you a loan, someone helped you out with something, and you don't show gratitude, you're an ingrate, right? Essentially, you're an ingrate. So when we look at it in the bigger scheme of things, right, God gives us air, God gives us water, God gives us food, God takes care of our needs. You're going to say, well, I could use more, I could use this. Okay, but essentially God is taking care of our needs, some more, some less, etc. If we don't give thanks to him, right, in any way, shape, or form, we're an ingrate. Person will say, I did it myself, I'm God's gift to the world, what do I need God for, and all this. We're an ingrate, right? And at a certain level, most people are probably like that because, how much can we thank God anyway? So a person will say, no matter how much I thank him, it's not going to matter. But you're right. That is true, up to a point. But still, when a person prays, imagine you're going to say, oh, God, the stars, the moons, Saturn, those rings, those beautiful rings. God's like, thank you very much. What about Pluto? Even though it got demoted as a planet, frozen tundra. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Thank you very much. What about, God doesn't need that. He gives us the ability to draw close to him, right? But if we don't thank him, just like if a person eats something, they don't make a blessing, what's going to happen? They're called the thief. What do you mean I'm called the thief? Why should you be called the thief? Because you're getting benefit from something you didn't thank him for, right? It's like you stole it, but I didn't steal it, right? I paid for it. So my credit card bill, right? It's paid for. So how is it like I'm stealing? Because you're not giving thanks to where it needs to go, right? So therefore, at a certain level, I'd say maybe we're all ingrates. We all have a lot to work on. I don't think there's any question, about that. But we have to put our best foot forward, right? We have to do everything in our power to do the right thing. No question about that. At the same time, we have to realize not only is there a lot of work to do, right? But we have to realize what the repercussions of what we do, because it's much better to fix things up now rather than being forced to have them fixed later, right? If, they can be fixed, which most people, again, most people are probably not that evil, even though they don't, most people don't know that much, most Jews don't know much about Judaism. Regardless, if they've done something egregious like desecration of Shabbos, that's a different issue, right? They'll suffer tremendously for that. They won't get a portion of the world to come, right? That's all true. But we have to, we have to work hard over here, and we have to realize that, we are going to pay, whether we pay in this world, whether we pay in the next world, or whether we pay in both. Because the idea of hell, it is suffering. But it's not suffering for no reason. That's another mistake, that people make, is that the suffering comes and God's just a masochist. But that certainly is not true. And the reason it's not true is because we have to take responsibility 100% for our actions. And the Torah tells me that clear, that there's no disagreement. Torah, the only question is how much a person's going to pay. How do they do it? Why do they do it? And all that. So isn't it better, I would say, to minimize what we're going to have to pay for later? Because we can't, we can't even imagine. We can't even imagine, that the suffering that a soul can go through. Because a soul, when the person dies, the soul is in flux. Soul doesn't know what to do. Soul doesn't know where to go, and all that. But the soul has to be in the ground. If the soul is not in the ground, what happens? It's even worse. Right, that the suffering that the soul goes through without being in the ground, we can't imagine. I know a great rabbi of blessed memory. I was once at a funeral, and they put the body in the back of the hearse, and the car's starting to move. People are following the car, showing respect. I kept hearing this rabbi say, "Get out of the way, just let him go." I can't imagine how much this soul is suffering. Just get out of the way, let him move. In order that the soul should be buried straight away. Here in Jerusalem, they don't let, if someone dies, 24 hours, that body's in the ground. Right? They don't let it stay overnight. Right? They don't let it stay more than 24 hours. I remember going to a funeral, a close friend of ours that funeral, the person died, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And I was pretty sure it was probably going to be the next morning. They buried him at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's when he was buried, like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they don't wait. They here the custom is you don't wait. If it's someone, let's say in the state, someone's coming out of the state or whatever, okay, depending how much time, etc. To be there is one thing. Here it doesn't matter. Here the custom is they bury him straight away. And again, the body sitting in wait is I can't imagine what the soul goes through. Just one other thing. Imagine that, the soul's in total flux. And what do some people do? They have a showing. They have a last showing, right, for the family. They'll say, okay, the family wants to go say, their last respects. And what do? They open the coffin. Now, when they open the coffin, what are they looking at? They're looking at a body without the soul. Now, the soul itself, like I said, as the little I do understand, about this, the soul does not know what to do at this point. The reason is you're looking at the body. The body is nothing, just a piece of flesh, right? It's a piece of flesh without the soul. The soul goes in, the body's a living being. The soul doesn't go in, the body dies, right? The soul goes out, or the soul doesn't go in either way, it's no body, right? It's certainly not going to live. But the point is, but what you're looking at is a person without a soul. And when the soul sees the person, because the soul is hovering over the body, when the soul sees the person looking at the body, and really, what is the body? The body is a combination, really, of body and soul. And the soul is not there, so the soul goes ballistic. The soul is not, the soul it can't handle it because, it's not in the body. You can't get back in the body. All right. So again, a lot of these things, we don't necessarily fathom, we don't necessarily understand, but, anyone who's had these out-of-body experiences understand, and they've told the same story. Jews and non-Jews, which again is a little bit scary, or as the English would say, maybe a little bit dicey, right? Regardless of all that, it's a pretty crucial thing to understand. We are going to have to give an accounting, and that accounting, right? Our soul may have to be seriously purged, right? And no one wants to go through that. No one wants that embarrassment. Someone would rather say, I'd rather have the suffering now. Give me the embarrassment now. Let me have it all right now so I don't have to suffer later. And we don't want that either. We want the best of both worlds, right? We don't want to suffer now. We don't want to suffer then, right? So, a person can pick their poison, so to speak. You may not have a choice either way, right? But in the end, we want to minimize that, but we want to understand, exactly what a person's in for and what the repercussions could be, later on, and how we should view it according to the Jewish view. See, look at that. Ended at the right time.
That was perfect. 60 minutes on the money.
Wait a minute, 10 more minutes.
Right. That's funny. Very good. All right. Well, I'm glad we got to cover it for sure. And so, guys, if you have any recommendations for shows in the future, feel free to send them to me, Facebook Messenger or Tanak Talk Questions at Gmail. And if you have, in fact, you can all send as many as you want, and we'll kind of review them and see which ones seem to be right in the ballpark of where we're wanting to head. And then we'll go that route. So, but meanwhile, tune in each week, same time, same place, Hashem willing. So, Rabbi Coffman, thank you so much for your time, and we will see you all next week. And we have one more show set up for tonight, TNT with Rabbi Stuart Federow. Tune in at 7 p.m. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and click that notification bell and set it to all.
Ding! I want to hear the ding.
You want to? How about I let you hear this?
Where's that ding? Come on.
I'll let you hear the sing instead of the ding. How's that?
All right. I guess I'll have to take that because I'm not going to get anything else.
There you go. Shalom, everybody. Take care. Peace.